A smuggler rescues an alien woman, and discovers she's the key to saving the galaxy. What if the person who saves your life is the very one destined to rewrite it? He was a lone human pilot, a war-hardened smuggler with nothing left but his ship and regrets. She was an alien woman found inside a forgotten stasis pod, silent, glowing, and watching him like she'd known him forever. But this wasn't a rescue. It was the beginning of a bond written across stars and bloodlines, a love that would awaken lost civilizations and challenge the laws of both science and soul. This is Starlight in Her Veins, a cinematic sci-fi romance story of intimacy, identity, betrayal, and transformation. A journey through light, longing, and a love that could shape the future of two worlds. Stay with them. Watch closely. And ask yourself, would you fall in love with someone not of your world, if it meant saving it? The void was never truly silent. Alec Rhane had learned that the hard way countless times over. The cockpit of his battered ship, the dusk wind, hummed with old energy and distant memories. Out here, at the edge of known space, nothing stirred except the dying embers of dead stars and the ghosts of long-forgotten battles. Calith hung below, ashen, cracked, barely holding an atmosphere. Just another war-wasted world nobody claimed anymore. Which made it perfect for a scavenger with nothing to lose. Alec leaned forward, brow furrowed beneath a mop of tousled black hair. His stubble had gone scruffy, but he didn't care. Not anymore. His fingers danced across the NAV console, fingers calloused from a life spent in war, exile, and maybe the occasional bad decision. That was when the sensor ping hit. Faint. Sporadic. But definitely there. Unregistered signal, his AI crooned through the dusty speakers, feminine and cold. Possible derelict object. Emitting trace-level quantum residue. Alec frowned. Quantum residue didn't just happen. You needed tech old enough or advanced enough to mess with reality's threads. Coordinates, he said. The ship banked gently, engines whispering as it descended through Calith's upper atmosphere. Outside, lightning shimmered violet along the planet's scorched clouds. The dusk wind nosed downward, past static-charged debris fields and blackened ruins of forgotten satellites. And then he saw it. Floating like a dream or a trap. A stasis pod. Sleek. Alien. Nothing like Terran design. Its metal was opalescent, reflecting light that wasn't there, shifting hues like oil on water. And it was intact. Alec's gut tightened. He'd seen pods like that once, during the war. But they were rumors. Whispers in soldier camps. Stasis shells from the Ithran Empire long thought extinct, buried beneath their own arrogance and tragedy. Life signs, he asked. Faint. Vital patterns fluctuating. Pod systems degraded but functional. Estimated power, 4 hours remaining. Alec stared at the pod, hovering in the cargo bay after he pulled it in. The internal lights pulsed gently, almost rhythmically, like breath. He didn't know why, but his chest ached watching it. Like something inside was calling out softly, insistently. He knelt beside it. The pod's surface was warm. Responsive. When he touched it, a shiver rippled beneath his fingertips. Warning, the AI snapped. Unknown biosynchronization detected. Before Alec could pull his hand back, the pod shuddered. Steam hissed from its seams. The lock disengaged with a soft click. And then, she opened her eyes. The stasis shell split like a blooming flower, revealing a figure curled inside a woman, humanoid in form, but unlike anything he'd seen. Her skin was pale lavender, almost translucent, and veins of glowing white-blue light pulsed beneath the surface. Her hair fanned out like liquid starlight, and her body was curled in a fetal position, slender arms shielding her face. Her chest rose slowly, then again. She was breathing. And then she looked at him. Those eyes opalescent silver with no whites, no pupils met his, and Alec felt it. A sudden, piercing jolt, as if something ancient and beautiful had reached into his very bones and whispered. "There you are." She sat up slowly, the stasis liquid sliding off her body like quicksilver. She wore a simple bodysuit that clung to her frame, and when she moved, her bioluminescent veins shimmered with a quiet grace. Alec backed up, hand twitching near his belt, where his plasma pistol sat holstered. "Don't," she said softly. Her voice wasn't spoken. It echoed in his mind, clear and resonant. He froze. She tilted her head. "You're not like the others." "The others?" Alec rasped. "What the hell are you?" A pause. Her expression was unreadable, like someone measuring the weight of their next 1,000 words. And then she said, "I'm the only one left." Alec didn't respond. Couldn't. The air between them was heavy. Not with threat, but possibility. Like the moment before a star ignites. She looked around the dimly lit bay, then back at him. "I need your help," she said, aloud this time. Her voice was quiet, melodic, accented in a way he couldn't place. "They're coming. And if they find me..." Alec narrowed his eyes. "Who's coming?" Her eyes darkened to a stormy silver. "The ones who want to silence what I carry?" "And what exactly is that?" She reached out slowly, placing her palm against his chest. The ship's lights flickered. Alec staggered. Visions hit him, brief, fragmented. A great tree made of crystal, pulsing with galactic breath. Entire worlds with skies made of light and song. Blood. Fire. Screaming. And then, silence. He gasped, wrenching away. What the hell was that? She looked at him, and for the first time something like fear crossed her luminous features. "That," she said, "was memory." And then, softly, "My name is Sera'Kai. And you're the last person I can trust." The dusk wind drifted silently above Calitha's ghost lands, cloaked by the dying planet's fractured magnetosphere. Alec Rhane paced his narrow corridor, every step echoing off the metal like a metronome to his thoughts. Sera'Kai sat in his medbay, perched on the diagnostic table like she belonged there. Like she'd always belonged there. She hadn't spoken since giving him that burst of memory. Vision. Madness. Alec wasn't sure what disturbed him more, the surreal flashes of a lost alien civilization or the fact that when she touched him, he'd felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Belonging. "Vitals are stabilizing," the ship's AI announced, her voice unnerved for once. "Subject's biosignature fluctuates between known and unknown spectrums. Neural activity is inconsistent with any species on file." "Inconsistent how?" Alec asked, arms crossed tightly. "Her brain operates on multiple frequency bands simultaneously, including quantum resonance." "Meaning?" "She's thinking in layers." He turned his gaze to the medbay window. Sera hadn't moved. She was examining her own hand, slowly flexing her fingers as if remembering what it meant to be alive. Her veins shimmered softly beneath her skin, pulsing with light, like starlight trying to break free. When Alec finally stepped in, she looked up. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. He didn't respond at first, just leaned against the wall, arms crossed again. "You didn't hurt me. You just showed me too much." Sera nodded slightly, strands of her glowing hair falling over her shoulder. I've been asleep a long time. It's hard to control the flow. You said people were coming for you? I said, beings, she corrected. They are no longer what they once were. They've changed since the fall. Alec blinked. The fall of what? She hesitated. Of everything. He scoffed lightly, running a hand through his tangled hair. That's a hell of a dramatic answer. I've found humans require a certain level of drama to believe truth, she replied, her voice dry but calm. You believe lies if they are dressed plainly. But if truth wears a crown of stars, suddenly it's believable. He stared at her for a long moment. You're not what I expected when I cracked that pod open. What did you expect? He paused. Something helpless. Sera looked at him, and though her expression didn't change, something in the air did. The soft lights dimmed, as if the ship itself was reacting to her mood. I chose to sleep, she said. And I chose to wake. But I didn't choose you. Alec's jaw tensed. I didn't ask to be part of whatever galactic myth you're carrying in your bloodstream. Yet here we are. Silence stretched between them. Then, softly, Alec said, you touched my mind. Sera nodded. It was necessary. You saw things. Memories. She didn't deny it. What did you see? He asked, voice quiet. She looked at him now with something like sadness. I saw a child screaming inside a burning cockpit. I saw a soldier held at gunpoint, refusing to abandon his crew. I saw a man walking alone through the wreckage of war, carrying the weight of all the ones he couldn't save. Alec's throat tightened. He hadn't spoken of those things to anyone, not in years. He hadn't needed to. The memories stayed buried in places even alcohol couldn't reach. You shouldn't have seen that. I didn't want to. But you showed me. Your pain sits close to the surface. Like cracked ice. Alec turned to leave, jaw set, but her next words froze him. And beneath that ice, you're beautiful. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. You trying to manipulate me? No, she said. I'm trying to understand you. The lights dimmed again, flickered and then flared as her bioluminescent skin pulsed in soft response. The ship's walls hummed as if breathing. Alec felt the hair on his arms rise. Why is the ship reacting to you? He asked. Sera looked around the room. It recognizes something familiar. Familiar how? You're not Terran. No, she said slowly, as if tasting the thought. But once, long ago, our kind touched your kind. Left seeds in your DNA. Shared fragments of ourselves when the stars were still young. Maybe that's why you hear me. Feel me. He took a step forward, unable to hide the fascination now simmering beneath his suspicion. You said you didn't choose me. Then why did your pod respond to me? Why not stay asleep? Sera looked up at him. Her silver eyes held something ancient. Something breaking. Because, she said, something inside me recognized something inside you. And for the first time in 1,000 years. I didn't want to be alone anymore. Her voice trembled. And so did he. The first ping was subtle. Alec Rhane was in the cockpit, boots on the console, half listening to a drifting music broadcast from one of Calitha's abandoned relay towers. The tune, something old and Terran and bluesy, crackled through static. Then the sensor alarm chirped. Just once. False contact, he muttered, swinging his legs down and sitting upright. His fingers tapped across the console, bringing up the passive scan overlay. The screen flickered, displaying space around the dusk wind in dull grayscale. Nothing but rock, dust, and ancient wreckage. And one anomaly. A shadow. Just outside standard sensor range. AI, he said. Give me spectral breakdown on quadrant delta 6. A pause. Then. Unregistered ship. No IFF. Scattering field active. Maintaining exact vector with us for the last 13 minutes. Alec's stomach dropped. And you're just telling me now? I assumed it was coincidence, the AI replied coolly. Until it matched our last 3 course changes in under 1.2 seconds. Alec stood, grabbing his sidearm from the holster near the NAV screen. Not coincidence. That's tailing. He strode out of the cockpit, down the short corridor toward the engine bay where Sera'Kai had been meditating, her legs folded in a lotus-like position, her glowing hair fanned out around her like a halo of starlight. She opened her eyes the moment he entered. They're here, she said before he could speak. You felt them. She nodded. They don't broadcast. They absorb. The silence around them is too perfect. Do you know who they are? Sera stood, her long limbs moving with uncanny grace. No. But they smell like control. Like systems built to possess, not understand. Alec moved past her toward the weapons cabinet. All right. We're gonna play this smart. Drop to Calitha's shadow side, cut emissions, wait it out. No, Sera said. He turned to face her. No. They're not watching. They're waiting. Hurting us. They want us to go somewhere. Alec froze. The pieces clicked too cleanly in his mind. Trap. She nodded once. Okay, he muttered, already rerouting power to the shield grid. Then we don't run. We turn. The dusk wind peeled into a hard roll, dipping into the fractured edge of Calitha's magnetosphere. Space around them sparked with debris and solar radiation storms noise to confuse any lock. But the tailing ship followed. Smooth. Calculated. No panic. It didn't fire. That was worse. They're studying us, Alec muttered. From the co-pilot chair, Sera reached out toward the console without touching it. The controls glowed faint purple beneath her hand. Alec glanced sideways. How are you doing that? I'm harmonizing, she said calmly. The ship's system has organic subroutines. They are responding to me now. As if we were speaking in a half-remembered tongue. You're interfacing with Terran tech. I'm not interfacing, she said, eyes glowing. I'm waking it up. The cockpit dimmed as every control panel synchronized into a pulsing pattern, like a living organism preparing to move. Then the enemy ship uncloaked. A jagged silhouette emerged from the black matte black dagger with no visible windows, no running lights. Its hull shimmered with phase shielding, absorbing background radiation like a sponge. Alec's breath caught. I've seen ships like that, he whispered. Used by Black Ops mercs. Ones who don't exist. They hunt for high-value targets and vanished before you know you were worth anything. Sera's voice was steady. They want me. Then they'll have to go through me? She looked at him and for the first time, something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. You would do that? Without knowing why I'm being hunted. Alec cracked a small, grim smile. Let me guess. You're dangerous. Possibly catastrophic. Perfect. I've always had a thing for complicated women. Outside, the enemy ship launched 2 guided drones. Silent. Precision machined. No heat trail. But the ship screamed an alert because Sera felt them. She rose to her feet, placed both hands on the console. Her veins flared brighter. I can reroute shield energy, she said. But I'll need you to trust me. I just met you yesterday. Then we're overdue. Alec grabbed the yoke, flipped the ship into a full evasive spiral. Do it. The moment Sera synchronized with the ship, the entire dusk wind shivered. Lights flickered, but instead of glitching they realigned. Alec watched in awe as the shield display recalibrated in real time, drawing energy from her body to reinforce the weak spots. Engaging proximity pulse, she said, voice low and calm. What does that do? You'll see. As the drones closed in, Sera inhaled and exhaled. Her pulse of energy surged through the ship. The forward hull emitted a ripple invisible to the eye but screaming with harmonic force. The drones shattered mid-flight. Crumpled like paper. Alec turned to her, stunned. What was that? Vibration warfare, she said softly. My people believed sound could be more precise than violence. We were half right. The enemy ship began to retreat, slipping back into stealth mode. Alec's instincts kicked in. No way we'll let them go. He flipped the comms to manual override. AI launch a tracking spike. Piggyback it on our old ID beacon. Burst signal. Locked and fired, the AI responded. Alec turned to Sera. They'll think they slipped away clean. But we'll know where they go. And when they come back, she said, we'll be ready. The two stood in the darkened cockpit, the hum of the ship now matching her heartbeat and his. For a moment, nothing moved. And then Sera said, barely above a whisper. You fly like someone who has nothing left to lose. Alec looked at her, tired eyes searching hers. And you speak like someone who has everything to hide. They stood there. Breathing. Watching. Listening to the stars. And without touching, they were already beginning to merge. Space had gone quiet again. After the drones fell and the enemy ship retreated into black silence, Alec guided the dusk wind into a low orbit behind one of Calith's shattered moons. No one would find them here. Not yet. The ship's hum had changed. It no longer sounded like a machine to him but like something breathing. Alec walked the corridor barefoot, pulse still hammering from the firefight. The lights had dimmed to a soft gold, flickering gently like candlelight. The environmental systems, normally sterile and clinical, now whispered warmth into the air. He reached the common bay and found her there. Sera'Kai stood by the viewport, silhouetted by the stars. Her back was to him, and her long, glowing hair flowed down the curve of her spine like liquid moonlight. The galaxy stretched beyond her in endless silence. She didn't turn, but she spoke. I didn't want to kill them. Alec leaned against the wall. They didn't give you a lot of choice. Sera slowly placed her hand on the viewport glass. Her fingertips glowed faintly, and for a moment, the stars on the other side of the glass shimmered reacting to her touch, or his imagination. I was grown to preserve life. Not end it. Alec stepped closer, studying her carefully. You said you're the last of your kind. She nodded. The last Ethran with a functioning resonance core. My body was engineered to hold knowledge, memory, power. But it makes me a target. Because you're a living database. Her lips curved slightly. Because I'm a living seed. What I carry can grow, or destroy. Depending on how it's used. Alec took another step. Why tell me this? She turned now, slowly, and faced him. Her expression was unreadable, ethereal. But her voice trembled at the edges. "Because you touched me," she said. "And I didn't break." He looked at her, really looked at the fear beneath the calm, the exhaustion in her eyes, the guarded hope. It caught him off guard. "Nobody's ever said that to me before," he said. "What? That I didn't break something?" Her gaze softened. Alec exhaled and sat on the low bench by the central control table. The cabin lights flickered slightly as he rubbed his hands together, restless. "I used to lead squadrons," he said quietly. "I believed in the mission. Until I found out the mission didn't believe in me." He looked up. "They sent us in to die. My people. My government. Half my squad didn't make it back, and the half that did well, we weren't exactly welcomed as heroes." Sera sat across from him, silent. "I've been drifting ever since. Smuggling, salvaging. Pretending I'm just looking for quiet." His eyes found hers. "But the truth is, I haven't known what the hell I'm doing." Sera tilted her head. "Until now." He gave a wry smile. "Still figuring that out." She reached across the space between them. Not to touch, not quite, but her hand hovered above his. Just close enough that the light from her palm reflected on his skin. And then she whispered, "Close your eyes." Alec hesitated. Then obeyed. He felt a warmth, not heat presence. Her fingers didn't make contact, but he could feel her in his mind, like a soft current flowing just beneath the surface. Images flickered in his mind's eye. A planet blooming with bioluminescent forests. A child laughing inside a field of gravity bubbles. A tower of crystal singing into the vacuum of space. And then Sera. Alone. Floating in that stasis pod. Waiting. The moment lasted only seconds, but it left his body humming, like every cell had been quietly rearranged. When he opened his eyes, she was watching him. Not smiling. Not crying. Just seeing him. "You harmonized with me," she said, voice quiet. "Your neural pattern responded instantly." Alec blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means your body, your soul was willing to listen." They sat in stillness, and for the first time since the war, Alec felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with adrenaline or fear. It was trust. Not full, not complete, but like a seed. Fragile. Waiting. Sera broke the silence. "Would you like to see something?" Alec raised an eyebrow. "More visions?" She stood and extended her hand. "Not in your mind. In mine." He took her hand. The moment they touched, light pulsed up their arms, soft, warm, not painful. The ship responded immediately, lights rising, energy panels glowing faintly purple, like the vessel was excited. She led him to the ship's central core, where the old fusion drive still thrummed with Terran engineering. But tonight, something else pulsed beside it, a resonance chamber she'd activated when he wasn't looking. It floated in the air like a crystal heart, pulsing in time with both their breaths. "What is that?" Alec whispered. "A mirror," she said. Inside the resonance, he saw them, an echo of their forms, two silhouettes bound in strands of shimmering light. "This is the beginning," she said. "The bond has started." Alec stared, stunned. "Started? We're not joined yet," Sera whispered. "But, if we continue to align, if we continue to trust, it will deepen. And then..." She looked at him with something between wonder and fear. "Then we won't just feel each other," she said. "We'll amplify each other." Their fingers were still touching. and neither one pulled away. The warning klaxon screamed through the dusk wind just as Alex sealed the primary airlock. Micrometeor impact, the ship's AI announced, voice sharp. Starboard hull breach minor, but venting atmosphere. Engineering bay. Alec didn't hesitate. He sprinted down the corridor, pulse thudding in his ears. The ship shuddered again as emergency plates tried to seal the breach. Sparks danced along the walls. When he reached the engineering bay, the lights were strobing red and one of the plasma conduits was leaking violet energy, unstable and humming with that strange etheric resonance. Sera was already there, standing far too close to the surge. Her hands hovered near the conduit, glowing in sync with its violent pulses. Back away from that. Alex shouted, rushing forward. I can stabilize it, she replied, calm but strained. You don't know how Terran conduits react to your energy? He grabbed her arm and yanked her back. Just as he did, a surge of plasma exploded from the core. Alec took the full force of the blast across his shoulder and chest. He hit the wall hard. Slid to the ground. Everything went white. He came to seconds or maybe minutes later, blinking through the haze of pain. His chest armor had melted in places. Smoke rose from his left side. He tried to move and groaned. Then he felt it. Cool hands. Glowing fingers. A voice murmuring not in sound, but inside him. Don't move, Sera said softly. She was crouched beside him, her expression focused but pale, her bioluminescent skin dimming. What are you doing? He rasped. Trying to fix you? He felt it like silk threading through fire. Her hands didn't touch his burned skin directly, but hovered just above it, vibrating. A faint purple light radiated from her fingertips, sinking into his wounds, drawing something out. You're stabilizing me with light, he whispered. With resonance. I'm guiding your cells to remember what they were before the trauma. That's not how biology works. It is now. His vision swam. He wanted to argue. Joke. Anything. But then something strange happened. His blood responded. It glowed. Where Sera's energy met his wound, his blood shimmered not just red, but with threads of faint gold. And more than that, it moved toward her, like a tide following the moon. Sera gasped. Her hands trembled. This isn't possible. What? Alec whispered. You're not just reacting to my energy. You're echoing it. She placed her hand fully over the wound now, letting the glow intensify, and suddenly they were somewhere else, not in a ship, not in space. Inside each other. Alex stood on an endless plain of stars, weightless. Sera stood opposite him, barefoot, clothed in light, her hair drifting like the auroras of old Earth's poles. Where are we? He asked aloud, or maybe through the bond. My resonance chamber, she said. The one that lives inside me. You've entered it. I didn't mean to. You were invited. Their hands reached for each other instinctively, and the moment they touched, he saw flashes again. A warrior in obsidian armor. Human. But not fully. Eyes glowing with the same purple light Sera bore. A moment of unity between an Ethran priestess and a Terran soldier, hands joined over a child whose skin shimmered like starlight. Genetic code unwinding like song, dancing in spirals between them. A name, whispered through eons. Rhane. Alex staggered back in a vision. That was my name. That was my ancestor. Sera looked shaken. You're not just compatible. You're descended. Someone in your line carried Ethran resonance. Hidden, dormant. Until now. He couldn't breathe. So what does that make me? She stepped forward, brushing a hand against his cheek. It makes you the first Terran in 1,000 years who can truly bond with me? The vision dissolved like mist. Alec gasped awake on the cold engineering floor. Sera was still there, her eyes wide with quiet awe and fear. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Alec whispered, "This isn't just about trust anymore, is it?" Sera shook her head. "No. It's destiny. Written in blood." He reached up, weakly, and took her hand. It glowed between them again, this time brighter. Stronger. She leaned closer, eyes searching his. "If we keep going, if we let this bond finish forming, you won't just feel what I feel. You'll become part of me," she said. "And I of you?" Alec looked at her, at their joined hands, at the faint threads of purple light now dancing across his fingers. "Then let it happen," he said. Her breath caught. "You're sure?" "I don't think I've ever been more sure of anything." Outside the ship, the blackness stirred. The hunter ships were still out there. But inside the dusk wind, a new force was awakening, a union of species, of bloodlines, of destinies. And it had just begun. Alec had stopped dreaming in years. But that night, if night could be measured in deep space, he dreamed again. Not of war or fire or ghosts, but of light. A warm pulse beneath his skin. A voice humming in rhythm with his breath. And eyes, Sera's eyes, silver and soft, watching him like a moon watches its tides. He woke on the medbay cot, not in pain but changed. His body felt like it wasn't quite his. He could feel things now, the rhythm of the ship's pulse, the soft static charge between bulkheads, the way Sera's energy ebbed and flowed just a few meters away like a living aurora. He found her in the cockpit, standing before the star maps. Her hair was bound in a loose braid that still shimmered faintly, and she wore one of his spare jackets too big for her, sleeves rolled, but somehow regal. She didn't look at him as he entered. "You're different," she said. "You did something to me?" "We did it together," she corrected, turning now to face him. "Your blood, your resonance, it's adapting. You're not just reacting anymore. You're beginning to harmonize with the frequencies I carry." Alec leaned on the edge of the console, studying her. "What does that mean in real terms?" Sera's gaze dropped to the star map. She reached out and traced a line across the void, drawing a path between old stars and scarred systems. "It means you may be the only living being in the galaxy capable of opening what my people left behind." Alec's brows furrowed. What exactly did they leave behind? Her fingers stopped on a blinking marker deep in uncharted space. A red dot pulsed like a warning. Calidres V. A dead system. No atmosphere. Rumored black site. "The vault," she said quietly. "Or what your people call the Ithran Singularity Engine." Alec exhaled. "You're talking about a myth." "I am the myth," she said, eyes locking on his. "The vault exists. And if what we saw in your blood is true, then you're now encoded with a resonance key." Alec stared at the map. "Why did your people build it?" Sera's voice was soft. "Not as a weapon. As a seed. A core of life, history, evolution. Meant to be planted on a dying world to restore it. But after the war, no one trusted each other enough to share it. So it was hidden. Locked away with a resonance code that required unity, two species, aligned." She stepped closer now, lowering her voice. "No Ithran alone could access it. No human either. But together. We're the key," Alec finished, voice quiet with realization. She nodded. and now others are racing to reach it. The ship that followed us? It was pushing us toward Caladres. They want us there. They want you to open it. For what? Alec asked. Power? Control. Sera''s voice turned cold. For Empire? A long silence passed. Alec rubbed the back of his neck. So let me get this straight, I go from smuggling stolen COMM tech to carrying the password to a galactic reset button. Her lips curled faintly. Fate has a sense of irony. He looked at her. Really looked. The way her silver eyes shimmered with weight. The lines of strength carved through her grace. The quiet sorrow she wore like armor. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. You already are, she said gently. They stood there, the low lights of the cockpit bathing them in gold and blue. Around them, the stars drifted. Silent. Waiting. Sera stepped closer. There's something else. Alec raised an eyebrow. You've got a habit of dropping world-changing news in stages. She didn't smile this time. She reached into the jacket pocket and pulled out a crystal shard the size of a child's palm. It pulsed softly with the same glow that danced through her veins. This is a fragment of the vault's echo key, she said. It's been dormant for centuries. But it lit up after we bonded. Alec took it. The moment it touched his skin it sang. A harmonic chord rang in the air, soft and perfect, vibrating through the deck beneath them. The lights flickered, the NAV's system surged. The dusk wind responded like a living being awakening from a dream. It recognizes you, Sera whispered. Alec stared at the shard, awe cutting through his usual cynicism. That thing has been waiting, for me? For someone like you, she said. Someone with me? Their eyes met again. No tension. Just the quiet, undeniable truth between them. He stepped closer, their bodies inches apart. We're going to that vault, he said. We're going to beat them there. And if they follow? His eyes narrowed. Then we show them what resonance really means. She smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't tinged with sorrow. It was bright. Whole. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. The shard pulsed between them. Then let's change everything, she said. Together, they stared out into the stars, toward Caladres V, toward a place where death and rebirth would collide. And deep in the ship's resonance chamber, the crystal heart pulsed louder than ever. The dusk wind slipped through the edge of a dying star's corona, light fracturing against its battered hull like golden rain. Sera watched from the viewport, eyes narrowed against the radiant beauty. They were near now. The coordinates had led them to Arish 4, a frozen rock orbiting a dying sun. Once a lush Ithran sanctuary world, it had been scorched during the Resonance Wars, now just a forgotten tomb of crystal bones and collapsed archives. Sera had grown quiet as they approached. Alec hadn't pressed. He knew that look, he'd warned it before walking through the ruins of fallen comrades. Still, as they landed and the ramp hissed open, he shot her a glance. You good? Sera didn't answer right away. She adjusted the crystal core slotted into her belt and stepped into the cold light. I was raised on echoes, she said softly. But this is memory made dust. They stepped out into the ruins. The outpost had once been a temple, a spire of prismatic crystal that sang with energy. Now it stood shattered, jagged shards piercing the snow like broken ribs. Every step Alec took crunched against glass like frost, and the air buzzed faintly, as if even silence remembered music. He touched the hilt of his rifle. I don't like this. Feels like a trap. It is, Sera said. Alec froze. What? She turned to him, cloak whipping in the wind. Not for us. For them. There are things buried here, fail-safes left behind by my ancestors. And there's something I need to retrieve. Let me guess, Alec muttered. It's in the scariest part of the ruins. Sera's lips twitched. Of course. They descended into the heart of the ruined spire, the wind dying behind them. The air grew warm, unnaturally so. Alec noticed lights flickering faintly along the walls, powered by something deep underground. The inner sanctum was circular, lined with broken steely etched in luminous script. At the center stood a pedestal, and resting atop it, a small memory prism. Sera approached it slowly. Reverently. This prism holds the vault's activation codes, she said. And the echo logs of the last bonded pair to attempt opening it. Alec watched her face as she reached out and touched the crystal. Light filled the chamber. Voices rose from the air like ghosts. Two figures shimmered into view, holographic, but more than that. Alec recognized their resonance from the vision he'd shared before, a Terran soldier and an Ithran priestess, standing close, hands entwined. Is that, Alec began. My mother, Sera whispered. And, her bonded. Your ancestor. The recording played. The vault must be hidden, the Ithran woman said. They'll use it to rewrite life itself if they find it. The human nodded. We'll encode the key into our bloodlines. Split the resonance. And if they come for us, then let our children be stronger than we were. The image flickered. A moment of pure intimacy passed between the pair. A kiss, tender, quiet, eternal. Then darkness. Sera pulled her hand back. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she said, voice hollow, they died here. Protecting that code. Alec placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. And now we finished what they started. Before she could answer, the walls screamed. A pulse ripped through the ruins, throwing them both off their feet. The prism cracked. From the far end of the chamber, a figure stepped through the shadow. Sera gasped. Arakan. Alec rose slowly, rifle in hand. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in sleek Ithran armor, but there was something wrong about him. His skin shimmered with synthetic veins, and his eyes, once silver, glowed red. You remember me, Arakan said, voice a distorted echo. I'm flattered. You were one of us, Sera whispered, standing. A defender. A scholar. I was left behind, Arakan snarled. You all fled into your stasis pods, hoping time would forget your failures. But I stayed. I adapted. He raised one arm. Energy pulsed at his palm. Alec shoved Sera aside just as a bolt of crackling plasma struck where she'd stood. We're not here to fight you, Alec growled. But I am here to destroy you, Arakan snapped. The vault is not salvation. It's a weapon. And I will wield it alone. Sera's voice rang out. You can't access it. You don't have resonance. Arakan's expression twisted into a smile. I don't. But he does. He pointed at Alec. And Alec felt a sharp, wrenching pull inside his chest. Like something was trying to rip the bond from him. His knees buckled. Sera screamed, lunging forward, her hand glowing brighter than he'd ever seen. Their bond surged in defense, wrapping him, shielding him, pushing Arakan's force back. Light exploded. A wave of purple-gold resonance burst from their bodies, flooding the chamber with raw energy. The holograms on the wall ignited, the old crystal veins lit up. Alec could feel Sera'Kai's pulse sinking with his furious, protective, desperate. Arakan staggered, roared, then vanished into the shadows, fading through a cloaking field. Silence fell. Alec collapsed to one knee, gasping. His skin still crackled with aftershocks. His blood glowed again brighter. Sera knelt beside him, clutching his face. "Are you with me?" she whispered. He nodded weakly. "Yeah. But what the hell was that?" "An echo siphon," she said. "He tried to steal your bond energy, use it as a substitute key?" Alec shook his head. "Why me?" "Because you're not just compatible anymore," she said, voice raw. "You're anchored. You're the key now, Alec. And if they take you..." "They won't," he said, grabbing her hand. "Not while I'm breathing." Their foreheads touched. Their blood hummed in resonance. The prism on the pedestal pulsed once more and unlocked. Sera looked down. "We have the map to the vault," she said. Alec rose slowly, his body aching but his eyes alight. "Then let's finish this." The dusk wind sailed silently through the veil between stars. They had left Erish 4 behind, its shattered spire and phantom recordings echoing only in memory now. The vault coordinates pulsed softly in the NAV system, a star-sized secret drawing them forward. But inside the ship, silence reigned. Thick. Tense. Inevitable. Alec leaned against the doorway of his quarters, watching Sera from across the narrow room. She stood barefoot on the metal floor, arms crossed over her middle, her hair still glowing faintly from the resonance surge. She looked calm. But Alec could feel her pulse inside him. Faint but rising. Like a second heartbeat. And it matched his. "We've crossed the tether threshold," she said quietly. He nodded. "I feel it. Everywhere." Their shared energy had been growing since the first touch, the first vision, the first rescue. But now it pulled at him, not metaphorically, not emotionally but physically, like a gravity that only grew the longer he resisted. "I can't block it out anymore," he admitted. "You're not meant to." He took a step forward. "Then what happens if we stop resisting it?" She looked up at him, silver eyes soft. "Then we become more than we were?" He reached for her hand. The moment their skin touched, the ship's lights dimmed and shifted, soft purple and gold waves radiating outward from the center of the room. The dusk wind responded like a living being, sensing the change in its core. Sera exhaled, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Alec." But he was already pulling her closer. Not urgently. Not roughly. But like someone reaching for a truth he'd spent a lifetime denying. Their mouths met. And the bond snapped into place. Electricity rippled down Alec's spine as their energy fields merged fully for the first time, resonance spiraling through them like twin stars caught in each other's orbit. The kiss was more than hunger, it was alignment. Every movement, every touch fed the tether. Lights flared across the cabin walls in response to their breathing. Clothes were shed slowly, ritualistically. His fingers brushed over the lines of her luminous skin, glowing brighter with each pass. She shivered against him, not from cold, but from recognition. "You're sure?" he whispered, forehead against hers. Her reply came through the bond itself, warm and wordless. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." When they finally joined, it was not flesh alone, it was frequency. The resonance overwhelmed the ship's systems. Lights pulsed. Systems hummed. In the engine core, the etheric crystal flared to full intensity, as if echoing their intimacy. Their bodies moved together with instinct, grace, oneness. Neither leading. Neither following. just existing within each other. Time fractured. They fell through shared memories, visions of stars being born, planets crumbling, moments in Alec's childhood he'd buried, fragments of Sera'Kai's stasis dreams, loves lost, and hopes forgotten. In each other, they remembered everything. And something new was born between them. Not just a bond. A permanent resonance. Tethered. Quantum aligned. Unbreakable. Later, they lay tangled together beneath the ship's gravity canopy, the world outside silent except for the hum of hyperspace. Sera'Kai's head rested against Alec's bare chest. Her fingers traced lazy, glowing lines across his skin, runes of memory, pleasure, protection. Did the ship, he started. Feel everything, she finished, smiling softly. Yes. It's alive, Alec. It's now a part of our bond. So we're piloting a voyeur? She laughed, musical and tired. More like a witness. The ship recognizes us as a new energy source. It will evolve with us now. Respond faster. Protect harder. Alec pulled her tighter. I don't want to lose this. You won't, she said, nuzzling close. We're tethered now. Even in death, we'll remain linked across time. He was quiet for a long moment. I've been alone for so long, he said. I didn't know I was waiting for something. For you. Sera'Kai tilted her head up. Her silver eyes shimmered in the dim, pulsing glow of their cabin. I've waited 1,000 years to be seen, Alec. You looked at me and saw a person. Not a relic. Not a weapon. Just me. He kissed her forehead. Then her lips. Then her neck. And she melted into him again, the bond humming softly with everything unsaid but deeply known. Outside, space drifted silently. But inside the dusk wind, two souls had fused, anchored by starlight, forged by choice, and carrying the power of a dying civilization's last hope. They should have felt untouchable. After the tether, Alec and Sera'Kai moved like twin pulses through the dusk wind. The ship had awakened in ways even Sera'Kai hadn't expected, its systems responding as if the vessel itself had become an extension of their bond. Autopilot no longer required manual calibration. Alec could think a command, and the ship would obey. Sera'Kai could manipulate the resonance core without touching a single interface. It felt like magic. But even magic has limits. The first sign was a static pulse in the comms, so brief it barely registered. The second was worse. A sharp, stuttering drop in gravity. Then nothing. The ship froze. Sera'Kai jolted upright from the co-pilot seat. What? Alec's voice was sharp. System lockdown. External override. That's not possible unless... The ship jerked violently. The lights cut out. A deep hum, foreign, heavy, replaced the ship's usual comforting resonance. Then came the boarding clamps. They were being pulled in. No, Sera'Kai whispered, horror blooming across her face. That signal, it's tethered. But twisted. Corrupted. Alec bolted for the weapons locker, only to find it sealed. A voice crackled through the ship's audio systems, dry, amused, and bitterly familiar. You tethered her, Alec. And now you've given me everything I needed. Sera'Kai staggered. That voice. I know it. The air shimmered and Arakan appeared on the bridge in full projection. His red vein form now clad in battle tech. Cold. Transhuman. I let you find the vault coordinates, he said. I let you tether. Because the stronger your bond, the more power I inherit when I take it from you. Sera'Kai's breath caught. You can't sever a tether? I'm not severing it, he said. I'm reclaiming it. Then, to Alec. You really thought she was the prize, didn't you? But you're the anomaly. The only Terran in 1,000 years whose blood sings with Ethrin light. The ship bucked violently. The next second, a siphon field activated beneath her feet, a net of golden light that grabbed Alec like claws. Alec! Sera lunged forward, but she was thrown back by an invisible force. Alec gasped, his body pinned midair, veins lighting up painfully as Arakan's tech began to drain the resonance from him. Sera don't let him. But the words vanished in a flash of light. Alec was gone. Only silence remained. 6 hours later. The dusk wind set adrift in deep space, systems paralyzed, its heart ripped out. Sera hadn't moved from the spot where Alec had disappeared. Her hands trembled. Her hair hung limp. Her glow flickered like a dying signal. The tether had not broken, but it had been silenced. She could still feel him. Distant. Weak. But alive. And that was worse than death. Because it meant he was suffering. She stared at the dark console, then stood with slow purpose. Siphon field, she whispered. He's using an ancient inversion array. The AI buzzed uncertainly. Our power core has been suppressed. I don't need the core, she murmured. She walked barefoot to the resonance chamber. Placed her palm on the crystal heart. It lit up at her touch just barely. Then she did something she had never dared. She began to sing. Not with words. With resonance. A low, harmonic sound left her throat, ancient, haunting. It vibrated through the ship's bones, down into its circuits, and into the sleeping systems. The dusk wind shuddered. The engines flickered to life. The NAV system rebooted with a flare of Ethrin script. Sera opened her eyes, silver burning. You wanted power, Arakan, she whispered. But you took my bonded. My anchor. She stepped into the cockpit, voice low and filled with fire. Now you'll face what happens when a princess becomes the weapon. Elsewhere. Alec drifted in and out of consciousness, bound inside a glowing cage aboard a massive station orbiting the edge of Caladri's V. His veins still shimmered faintly. But they pulsed wrong. Arakan stood outside the cell, watching with fascination. You're still tethered, he murmured. Amazing. Even separated, your bond keeps feeding you. But soon, she'll feel your pain and break. Alec coughed. Blood touched his lips. Then he smiled. You really don't understand her, do you? Arakan frowned. What? She's not going to break, Alec rasped. She's going to burn through you? Back on the dusk wind, as the stars stretched into motion and hyperspace swallowed the ship whole, Sera's voice rang through the chambers like a vow. I'm coming, Alec. And the bond pulsed stronger than ever. The dusk wind tore through hyperspace like a blade of starlight. The stars outside blurred, smeared into ribbons of fire, but Sera didn't flinch. She sat at the helm, body humming with power, one hand fused to the resonance core, the other gripping the control yoke like it was an extension of her will. The ship wasn't flying, it was answering her. Her thoughts echoed through the corridors. Every panel, every system bent to her frequency. Alec had always said she flew like she was part of the ship. Now she was. Her voice was a low chant. Bring me to him. Show me the path. I am not asking. The AI responded not with words, but with emotion, a pulse of loyalty, of rage, of grief. Coordinates locked. Alec's signal weak, but a live beam from a black site in the orbit of Caladri's V. A dead world scarred by time, but somewhere beneath its iron crust lay the vault. And Alec. Inside the siphon station, Alec dangled in the resonance cage, barely conscious. His skin glistened with sweat, and his pulse flickered like a dying flame. But the tether held. Somewhere, across the black, he felt her coming. And so did Arakan. He stood before the siphon core, watching his energy arc from Alec's body into the vault key generator, a monolithic construct pulsing with sickly crimson light. Soon, Arakan whispered. She'll arrive. And when she does, I'll complete the cycle. He turned toward Alec's cage. I don't need your life, he said. I just need your bond. Alec blinked slowly. His voice came like sand. She's going to break you? Arakan smiled. We'll see. The arrival was silent. The dusk wind dropped from hyperspace like a falling star, cloak engaged. The siphon station loomed ahead, angular, dark, and humming with stolen light. Sera stood in the central corridor, wearing her battle mantle for the first time in 1,000 years. The fabric clung to her like shadow and flame, woven from microcrystal strands that shimmered with every heartbeat. In one hand, she held the broken memory prism of her parents. In the other her tether ring, still glowing with Alec's faint pulse. She pressed both to her chest and whispered, "Anchor me." Then she stepped into the drop pod chamber and launched herself toward the station. Impact. The siphon station shuddered as her pod ripped into its outer ring. Alarms howled. Drones activated. But Sera didn't slow. She moved like lightning through the hallways, unarmed, but unstoppable. Drones fired, but her resonance flared, shorting their circuits mid-burst. The walls warped around her, metal folding back like petals to let her pass. Every step brought her closer to the bond's poles. Then she found him. Alec, collapsed in the siphon cage, his body trembling. Alec. She ran to the interface. Arakan's voice crackled overhead. Careful, Sera. Disconnect him too fast, and you might unravel the bond permanently. Or worse, your own mind. She ignored him. Kneeling before the console, she extended both hands and sank her consciousness into the tether. The room vanished. Within the bond, Alec stood on the edge of a void, his body cracked with light, his eyes dull. Sera appeared behind him, glowing with fire and starlight. He turned. You came, he whispered. I never left, she said. They reached for each other. The moment they touched, the tether surged pure, incandescent resonance roared through the void. The siphon cage shattered in real space. And Arakan screamed. The real world again. Sera and Alec collapsed into each other as the cage dissolved, energy swirling around them. Arakan stood at the vault interface, eyes wide with horror. No, he hissed. You're not supposed to survive this. Alec rose, bloody but standing. Sera stood beside him, silver eyes burning. Let him go, Alec growled. Let's open the vault before he brings more hell. Sera looked at the interface, then at Alec. We do it together. They reached for the control crystal. Their fingers met. The crystal burst into blinding white. Calidry's VS crust split open. The vault rose not a fortress, but a garden. Massive living crystal towers spiraled into the sky, pulsing with life. The air changed. The darkness lifted. And across the galaxy, old Ethran satellites woke up, pinging signals long believed lost. The vault had not been designed to destroy. It had been designed to remember. To restore. To rebirth. And it had chosen them. Arakan tried one last attack, but the vault's defense systems activated. Pure resonance immobilized him. Sera approached him slowly. "You could have stood with us," she said. "But you wanted power. So now, you will be forgotten." And the vault removed him not with death, but with silence. Erased. Later, as the vault settled and the garden spread across Caladri's dead world, Alec and Sera stood in a central bloom, hand in hand. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Now that you're safe." He kissed her forehead. "I didn't survive because I'm strong," he said. "I survived because you were coming." Sera smiled. "I always was." The vault's rebirth had not gone unnoticed. Across the galaxy, sensors trembled. Abandoned satellites reactivated, their ancient etheric coding sparking to life. Forgotten colonies on the edge of extinction found themselves bathed in soft pulses of healing resonance. Crops regrew. Poisoned waters cleared. Sleepers in stasis pods began to stir. Every screen, every feed, every datapad now whispered one phrase in a language long thought extinct. The vault is open. The legacy awakens. And the names echoed with it. Alec Rhane. Sera'Kai. They stood together in the vault's central garden, where crystal spires stretched into the starlit sky and vines glowed with memory. The planet Caladri's V, once desolate, now hummed like a living heart. Alec watched the horizon, jaw tight. He still hadn't gotten used to the quiet. The peace. "I think I'm more afraid now," he admitted. Sera turned from the spiraling data flower she'd been calibrating. "Afraid of what?" "Of what they'll turn this into. Of what they'll turn us into." Her eyes softened. She stepped beside him. "They'll call us 1,000 things," she said. "Heroes. Prophets. Weapons." "They already are," Alec murmured. He showed her the latest data feed from orbit, news scrolls, military recon, political interest, even Terran, Enethran envoys en route to establish diplomatic contact. Sera touched the screen and it flickered away. "We're not theirs," she said. "Not to control. Not to brand." He looked at her, voice low. "But we changed the galaxy, Sera. Whether we meant to or not." She touched his face. "Yes. But we didn't do it by force. We did it by trust. By tethering. That's the legacy we're awakening, not just power. Connection." They stood there as the garden bloomed around them. Later that day, the vault welcomed its first visitors. A council of delegates from fractured worlds, human, Etheran, hybrid, and unknown, came to walk the paths. Scientists wondered in awe. Soldiers stood silent. Refugees wept in the grass, overwhelmed by the feeling of the place. But not everyone celebrated. Some called it unnatural. Others saw it as a threat, a technology too powerful to exist without ownership. One admiral demanded that Alec hand over access codes to the vault's core systems. Alec just smiled. "I don't own this place," he said. "It listens only to the tethered. And I only speak for myself." They pressed Sera too. But she stood before them, radiant and unreadable, and said simply, "This is not a throne. It's a promise. And it won't open to greed." The council broke into murmurs. But they could do nothing. Because for all their rank and resources, they couldn't replicate what Alec and Sera had become. Bonded. Balanced. Beyond control. That night, under the vault's singing stars, Alec lay beside Sera on a bed of soft bioluminescent moss. The garden glowed faintly around them, the air fragrant with renewal. He traced a finger along her wrist, watching the starlight beneath her skin. You ever think we were chosen? She tilted her head. No. He blinked. No. I think we chose ourselves, she said. Every time we reached for each other, every time we didn't run, we made that choice. The vault responded because we were honest. Alec considered that. You think honesty is the rarest power? She smiled faintly. It's the one that can't be stolen. Their fingers intertwined. And what about the future? He asked. We'll keep planting it, she said. Wherever the stars are broken. Far above them, a new constellation had appeared, one the vault had encoded into the night sky itself. It wasn't a map. It wasn't a warning. It was a symbol, two stars tethered by a line of light, orbiting each other endlessly. And across countless systems, the Forgotten began to remember. From a single spark in a forgotten cargo bay to the rebirth of a world, Alec and Sierra's journey has proven one thing. Love, true, resonant love, can cross any distance. Even species. Even stars. They weren't chosen by fate. They chose each other through pain, through uncertainty, through the gravity of what it means to see someone fully and still stay. And now, as the vault breathes with new life and the stars whisper of a child born from both war and wonder, their legacy is just beginning. So what do you think? Could you trust someone who wasn't human but saw your soul like no one ever had? Tell me your favorite moment. Share what stayed with you. And if you felt it, if this story made your heart ache just a little, leave a comment below. Because stories like this aren't just science fiction. They are a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, someone might be waiting to choose you back.